In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the media, lawmakers, everyone is doing everything they can to make you think Antifa doesn't exist. The gaslighting is disgusting, but they're taking extra steps further to sweep this violence under the rug and to instead paint you as the violent extremists. Thank God for President Trump declaring Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, but the truth is, the fight against Antifa and left-wing terrorism has only just begun. As new parents, the very last thing in the world that Brock and I want to have to worry about every night is whether or not we have quality protein for dinner, or honestly, whether we have anything for dinner at all. Especially last night, we flew in on the red eye the night before, we had nothing to cook, and immediately we took to the freezer. That's where Good Ranchers comes in. It's like having a personal butcher who delivers premium meat right to our doorstep so that we can focus on what really matters, those precious baby snuggles, and actually getting in a decent meal without having to worry about the grocery store chaos or spending insane amounts of money ordering out for dinner. Good Ranchers is 100% American meat and is sourced from local farms and ranches across the country, and they are incredibly flexible. You can pause or delay your boxes at any time. That alone is hugely important to me, given how many airplanes I'm on every single week. And if you use my code Isabel today, you can get $40 off plus free meat for life, people. What a deal. That is Isabel, code Isabel for $40 off plus free meat for life when you start a new subscription with Good Ranchers at goodranchers.com. Welcome to the table. Well, it's official. As of yesterday afternoon, the President of the United States has officially declared Antifa to be a domestic terrorist organization. Hallelujah. Thank you, President Trump. This has been a very long time coming. I know we very specifically called for the administration on the show last week to do this, but in case you didn't hear anything about this, because newsflash, the mainstream media is refusing to report on it, hence why we have independent media and shows like this, let's pull up some of the text of this executive order for you guys. This happened yesterday. They declared Antifa to be a terrorist threat. The rapid response account on X, which I highly recommend you follow if you're ever looking for very quick information about what the administration is doing, put together this tweet that President Donald J. Trump just signed an order officially designating Antifa not just as a threat, but a domestic terror organization. This has to be something of our utmost concern, our utmost attention, and with the fullest extent of the law, understanding that we have an obligation as a country to go after this group. He specifically in this text, about halfway through, says that this group, Antifa, has a routine of engaging in threats against political figures and activists. They recruit people to their organization. They train and radicalize young Americans to engage in violence and the suppression of political activity. And then they employ elaborate means and mechanisms to shield the identity of their operatives. That is very important and something we're going to talk a lot about on the show today. They shield and conceal their funding sources, which I'm very excited to be learning more about over the next couple of weeks from our friend Andy No, the resident Antifa expert in Western civilization today. And they conceal their operations in an effort to frustrate law enforcement and recruit additional members. This, to me, is a godsend that we have a president of the United States who understands just how subversive and secretive and shrouded behind dark money, dark web, dark everything Antifa really is. Because this is an organization that, as we talked about last week on our episode of the show related to Antifa, we in the conservative movement have been directly, intimately familiar with for a very long time. When we look at something happening, we can tell you exactly when Antifa has their hands all over it. But for whatever reason, law enforcement, political figures, the mainstream media, they haven't yet caught up to understanding that specific identification. And it is vitally important if we are serious about preventing any other assassination or violent crime against people who think like Charlie Kirk in the future, that we take the swiftest, strongest action against what we know to be a terrorist organization possible in the wake of Charlie's death. So again, we say thank you, President Trump, for taking on the leadership to declare Antifa to be this horrific, dangerous, violent terror organization. That designation is incredibly important. But I don't want us to think that him them signing one piece of paper in an executive order means that the work against preventing this violence is done. There is still a whole lot of work to do in identifying just how deep Antifa really goes in our society, and we'll be investigating that on the show today and for a long time after. And how much the people in power are working overtime to just cover up the fact that Antifa even exists. Kind of in the exact same string of behavior we've seen over the last several years, where anything that is remotely associated with the political right is immediately just a conspiracy theory spread by those dangerous misinformation officials on social media like your girl here. The mainstream media is already running cover for Antifa the minute we noticed that the actual weaponry that killed Charlie Kirk was engraved with Antifa slogans. We've seen it for over 2 weeks now. About 2 weeks now. And I expect we're going to see a lot more of this behavior in the wake of President Trump's executive order yesterday. In the last few days alone, we've seen Chuck Todd, for example, say, "I don't know what Antifa is."
They're going to try to create a new classification for anybody on the left who opposes Trump as somehow a member of Antifa and a terrorist.
Yes.
Like, this is coming. And I don't think we are fully... Now, I don't think there's any the problem. Like, I don't even know what Antifa is. I know what the definition of Antifa is, and
I know what the word means, but it's not a group.
There is no group.
No.
Mark Bray, you are writing this book, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. Explain this movement and its roots.
Mark Bray is a Dartmouth professor who has studied the Antifa anti-fascist movement. Antifa is a far-left political movement that argues it's necessary to confront hate groups, sometimes with force. Professor Bray is author of the new book, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook.
So that first clip there on one side of the screen, you saw Chuck Todd in 2025 saying, "I don't even know what Antifa is." Saying anything remotely associated with President Trump is going to label the left as Antifa, even when they've been calling themselves that for years, but interesting. But back in 2017, you also heard Chuck Todd on his own show interviewing a Dartmouth professor who literally wrote the book, The Anti-Fascist Handbook. Yeah, expected behavior. And Chuck Todd is not alone. Our favorite Rachel Maddow is also taking to airwaves to very specifically tell you that Antifa is not a real thing. It's not an organization. It's not something that inflicts physical violence upon Americans and citizens of truth-seeking orientation across the West. It's just a movement. It's an idea.
We've also now, in an executive order today, we've got the president describing Antifa, the anti-fascist, it's not even really a movement, the anti-fascist tactics of a portion of the protest movement as a domestic terrorist organization.
Friend to friend, by the way. I don't know if you've ever seen side-by-side photos of Rachel Maddow from before the leftist disease took ownership of her life. Friends don't let friends get sucked into leftism, okay? That's your homework for the rest of the day, is go look up those photos. But we're already seeing the media run extreme coverage for the fact that they say Antifa doesn't even really exist in the 5 minutes after it's become incredibly obvious that Antifa was involved in some capacity in the radicalization of the young man who killed Charlie Kirk. We know that, at the very least, he was inspired by Antifa in the actual weaponry used to kill Charlie with specific engravings. But I predict it's going to be about 5 seconds. 5 more seconds for the media to go even further and to say that anyone on the right is actually the violent terrorists in our country. Every left-wing talking head will go out of their way to say that Charlie Kirk's assassin clearly had nothing to do with Antifa, and that Antifa doesn't even really exist anyway. It's just an idea. That's not even like a far out prediction or like a crazy conspiracy theory idea that I have. We're just going to bookmark that, save that to your saved folder, because it's already happening. And I guarantee you it's going to become a whole lot more mainstream. Antifa, for goodness sakes, in the last 48 hours has become the new label of pride for the political left in America. I can't tell you how many left-wing Twitter accounts I've seen in the last 48 hours declare something along the lines of, I am Antifa. I guess that's their response to the rest of the world, the sane world, declaring we are all Charlie Kirk. But I am Antifa is a legitimate rallying cry of left-wing talking heads on cable television, of left-wing news accounts on X and everywhere else on social media, and even of people that you might not expect, people in government and law enforcement. Yesterday, our friend Chaya at Libs of TikTok, we love you, Chaya, you're amazing, ended up tweeting a story that started breaking about a police officer in Orange County, North Carolina, who apparently was a part of Antifa. He was one of these individuals taking to social media, making posts saying, I am Antifa, and following it up by saying that all Republicans should be executed. He said, my name is Brian. I am in North Carolina. I am Antifa, and I will never comply with a fascist regime. This next tweet from him, from Brian, the police officer in North Carolina. I maintain that the biggest mistake the U.S. government has ever made was letting the traitors from the Civil War off the hook and allowing them to come back into our country without punishment. When this is over and the right wing is once again defeated, convenient how he forgets that it was liberal Southern Democrats that led the KKK, but history lesson for another time. We will not make the same mistake. There will be war crime trials, and I can't wait to see every single one of them, the right wing, thrown in prison for the rest of their lives. It may even be time to bring back the guillotine. And it's not just police officers. Even Representative Jerry Nadler of the United States Congress is doing everything he can to convince you Antifa doesn't exist.
True. There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa that's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
Sir, there's videos everywhere online.
So Antifa really is everywhere, from police officers to members of Congress saying, I am Antifa, and the media all declaring their undying allegiance to an organization that they simultaneously say is not really an organization. It's a loose idea. And even then, it's not even a loose idea. It's just the natural, organic human response to fascism, even though there is one side of the political aisle in America today deploying all of the tactics of fascism, and it's ironically the side calling themselves anti-fascist. So I give it about 0.5 seconds before we hear every single leading Democrat of the Democrat Party declare that they too are Antifa. But I feel wildly comfortable with the response we're seeing from everyone else in the sane world, people with a soul, saying instead, we are all Charlie Kirk. We have all dealt with that very annoying bloating and gut discomfort that just won't go away, especially after having a baby. If you know, you know. And you know the usual advice is eat slower, walk after your meals, avoid all of the processed food, and sometimes that helps, but honestly, you still sometimes feel gross, even when you're doing absolutely everything right. That is where colostrum comes in. It's that amazing liquid gold first milk that is packed with proteins, growth factors, and antimicrobial properties that work together to boost your immune system, reduce inflammation, and actually repair your gut lining to cut down on bloating. Today's sponsor, Cowboy Colostrum, offers the highest quality bovine colostrum available in the United States. Cowboy Colostrum is 100% made in America, which we love, from grass-fed cows, and that's why it makes all the difference in the world. They don't overprocess or strip their colostrum like other brands do. They keep it whole and full fat for maximum nutrient density, which makes a world of difference. You can just add a scoop of their chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry flavor to your coffee or your smoothie in the morning, and you'll get all of those natural growth factors that can help your hair and skin look amazing. I've started adding it to my coffee in the morning, and I already notice a difference just a couple of weeks in. For a limited time, our listeners here at the Isabel Brown Show can get up to 25% off your order. Just head to cowboycolostrum.com/Isabel and use the code Isabel at checkout. That's 25% off when you use code Isabel at cowboycolostrum.com/Isabel. After you purchase your order supporter. They'll ask you where you heard about them. So please, please, please support our show and let them know that we sent you. I feel like we should again reiterate, because last week's episode clearly wasn't enough to drill in the reality of this into people's brains. There has been a long, long history of Antifa's direct violence against conservatives, including destruction of property, physical assault, and, of course, threats of death that have now manifested into an actual violent assassination. We talked about that at length on our episode a few days ago. We're showing you actual footage of myself being violently attacked by Antifa, Charlie's previous events being violently attacked by Antifa, and countless other individuals across the conservative movement. Last night, Michael Knowles was supposed to join Charlie Kirk on the next leg of his Prove Me Wrong American Comeback speaking tour. They have now rebranded it officially into the This Is the Turning Point tour. And Michael Knowles went anyway. He courageously spoke at the University of Minnesota to a completely packed, sold-out crowd. But even then, they can't help themselves. Antifa had to show up and demand that Erica Kirk and Michael Knowles be rid of from society just outside. With the Handmaid's Tale costumes, of course, naturally. I swear, every single thing these people think that they believe in is the opposite. Have you ever read The Handmaid's Tale? Different conversation for a different time. But seriously, hold up the freaking mirror for like 5 seconds, all of you people. The irony. It reminds me of the last few days. Now I'm going to go on a tangent. It reminds me of the last few days that everyone has been singing on TikTok, No One Mourns the Wicked, the song from the musical Wicked, which is incredibly ironic because the song is sung by all of the people in Munchkinland and across Oz after Elphaba is killed, saying, oh, thank goodness, good riddance, she's dead. No one mourns wicked people. But the irony is she was the good guy the entire time. So you're literally proving the point of the song, you idiots. I digress. We'll come back to that later. But these protesters outside of Michael Knowles' event, they might look wimpy. They might look like, whatever. They're not really posing a threat. They are related to the larger threat. And these slogans, hey, hey, ho, ho, Michael Knowles and Erica Kirk have got to go, eventually have manifested and escalated into the same type of pipeline of violence we've seen with Charlie Kirk. I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with people, how many events I have been to, how many chants I have heard of, hey, hey, ho, ho, Charlie Kirk has got to go, which seems catchy and a funny thing to scream into a microphone or write on a poster board at any one of these campus events. This is a very clear pipeline of words to actions to behavior that we are now seeing manifest in a movement, an organization, a very clear, well-funded militia of left-wing violence in our country, not just a loose idea. And I think it's time that we start genuinely paying attention to it. Most of the people involved in this movement, by the way, are not kids waving little rainbow fans on college campuses and standing outside doing silly little dances that eventually get shut down by frat bros, by the way. That's what ended up happening last night. A bunch of fraternity brothers showed up, tried to have a peaceful conversation with these people, and in about 4 seconds, they all left, which we love to see and Charlie would be very proud of. But outside of Charlie's memorial on Sunday, there was also a small group of protesters, and just one of them, identified by Andy No standing outside, is a familiar face of what he calls the Trantifa movement, this intersection between radical left-wing LGBTQ ideology and Antifa violence. Andy ended up tweeting this protester dressed in a hijab at the Charlie Kirk Memorial in Glendale is Trantifa member Brittany Erica Austin, previously Eric Austin, and now goes by Sumaya Dawood. He regularly goes to Antifa direct actions with a rifle. Armed protester at all of these things. I've reported on him a lot. And if I trust anyone to identify these people, I trust Andy No. Last week on the show, we outlined multiple examples of myself, Charlie, Andy No, as I mentioned, and Riley Gaines being violently attacked by Antifa at campus events over the past several years. Andy has now decided to remind the internet and the mainstream media, as they call this just loosely an idea, the natural organic human response to right-wing fascism, to remind you exactly what Antifa really looks like. Andy reshared this clip from May 8th of 2021 where he's actually running for his life from violent Antifa assault thugs threatening his existence. He posted this video to X. For those of you who are listening and you're not watching, you see Andy running for his life there. He's tackled to the ground. He ended up really injuring his legs. He was screaming for help, and no one was paying attention, genuinely running for his life. You see it all on the security footage here. You can see him being violently beat up. He ended up tweeting with this video, on May 8th, 2021, I ran for my life through streets of downtown Portland, Oregon. Antifa had discovered me working undercover after one of their members exposed me to the mob. I screamed for help as I fled, but drivers and pedestrians looked away. The businesses were all shuttered, remnants of the ongoing destruction from the 2020 BLM Antifa riots. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They caught me. Antifa tackled me to the ground, tearing my knee tendon in the process as I slid across the pavement. They punched me over and over and tried to choke me out. I barely managed to stumble into a hotel, begging the front desk staff to call 911. Like bleeding, leg completely destroyed. Who doesn't call 911? They didn't. They didn't call 911. Instead, they tried to force me back outside and told me to wear a COVID mask. Portland is another reality. I dropped to the floor, refusing to move, pleading for them to call the police. They refused. Outside, Antifa gathered. One of their ringleaders, Elizabeth Richter, the blonde woman, began rallying the crowd. She called on others on a live stream to come finish me off. She went inside the hotel and threatened me. Antifa also tried breaking their way into the hotel. I escaped only by jumping into an elevator with a hotel guest. After that, I was taken by ambulance to the hospital with a police guard. I was soaked in my own blood. On social media, Antifa immediately began trying to track which hospital I was in, hoping to finish the job. As soon as I was discharged, I had to flee Portland. I moved between safe houses in different states. Antifa's hunt for me was far from over. And here's how this ended. Portland police closed the case a few weeks afterwards, saying they couldn't identify anyone. No one was ever arrested, just like in 2019 when I was beaten to the point that my brain bled. But just an idea, right? Riley Gaines in 2023 was held captive on a college campus giving a speech that men should not belong in women's sports by radical Antifa terrorists, and we use that word appropriately now, and ended up later testifying before Congress about the harrowing experience. Listen to this.
In this room where I was held hostage and essentially held for ransom, actually not essentially, I was held for ransom, the protesters from outside the room were yelling at the officers who were on the outside of the door protecting me, "You're only protecting her because she's a white girl." And of course, these officers then were terrified. They were terrified to do their job because who wants to be accused of that accusation? They were yelling things such as, "You shouldn't have came here. You knew this was going to happen. You were asking for this. Open that door and let us at her and we'll handle her. She doesn't get to go home safely."
She doesn't get to go home safely. In that exact moment, by the way, when she was held captive, they were actually telling the school officials that they needed money if Riley ever wanted to see her family again, like literally holding her ransom. It was the most insane night. And ironically, actually, was the exact same night that Kristen Hawkins and I were attacked by violent Antifa protesters, which we showed you the footage of last week. This was all happening for years and years and years. Violent behavior ending in physical assault or threatening death if they didn't get their way as terrorists. But it's just an idea, right? I have loved partnering this year with Balance of Nature. Balance of Nature supplements are the result of years of research and development. They regularly go out of their way to test their products using independent third-party laboratory analysis, like actual scientific testing. Their ingredients are 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. I love the fruits and veggies supplement. It includes 31 colorful ingredients of 16 whole fruits and 15 whole vegetables like mangoes, pineapples, blueberries, bananas, mushrooms, wheatgrass, spinach, kale, aloe vera, and so much more. Their fiber and spice supplement is the only one on the market that combines 12 amazing spices and 4 whole fibers. And I don't know if you know this, but even with a very solid routine, most of us don't get enough variety of fruits and vegetables, spices, or especially fiber in our diet, even if we're super diligent about what we're eating. More than 90% of Americans do not meet the daily recommended intake of dietary fiber, so these supplements will make a huge difference in your life and health. You can take the fruits and veggies supplement with water or chew on them or just open them up and mix the powder into your favorite drink or water. It's super convenient and absolutely no mess. The fiber and spice supplement can also be mixed with water or your favorite drink, and their goal at Balance of Nature is to deliver the natural goodness with ingredients of fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers, just as nature intended. It has been a huge difference for me in my personal nutrition journey, especially as I've breastfed my daughter this year and constantly have to be watching what I'm eating, not just for myself, but for her as well. You can go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Isabel for 35% off your first order. Plus, you can get a free bottle of fiber and spice as a preferred customer. That is balanceofnature.com, promo code Isabel. One of our longtime friends and someone that we've really looked up to for his courage for many years is Billboard Chris, the legendary Billboard Chris, who was also violently assaulted by Antifa in January of 2023. His story is resurfacing this week as everyone starts to label Antifa as just an idea in the wake of President Trump rightfully declaring them a domestic terrorist organization. This tweet outlining his story popped up on my feed yesterday and is something that I just cannot stop thinking about. He said in March of 2021, March, not January, but yes, Antifa seems to be more than just an idea. This was a premeditated attack in Montreal with 6 people. Some had already fled in a car. My body cam was stomped to the ground in the middle of the street, so I filmed the last minute with my phone, blocking blows aimed for my head from a traffic cone. The base on those things is very dense, so one snapped my ulna. Police would not even investigate. Not a single media outlet reported on it except for the great Mr. Andy No, God bless him. 7 p.m. on a busy street on a Friday in Montreal and complete media silence. There's a photo of the X-ray from his arm actually being broken. You can see they literally just snapped his bone. But sure, just an idea. Rachel Maddow. And the video footage of this happening that he was able to capture on his phone is incredibly harrowing. Watch it for yourself.
You done out of here! Get the out of this neighborhood! Go. Go, Chris. Go, Chris. Get the out of here! Go! Transphobes! Go! Go! You leaving? Okay. Yeah. Leave then. Turn the around and leave. Get the out of here.
March of 2023.
Right.
Am I bleeding?
Yeah. All right?
Yeah.
Did you lose your camera?
I lost my body cam, yeah.
I love at the end there how you just see someone, of course, wearing a mask, turn around and look at him, acknowledge what happened, and then just keep walking. Did you see how many cars were driving down the street there? I mean, 7 p.m., Friday night, busy street in Montreal. Nobody had the courage to stand up and help. This was 2.5 years ago when the police refused to investigate because even then, Antifa wasn't real. It was just an idea. We are so privileged to be joined by the legendary Billboard Chris today to help give some more color to this story. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the Isabel Brown Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Isabel. So that attack that you just showed was actually 4.5 years ago. Someone had written the date wrong online.
Wow.
But yeah, the police don't want to do anything about it in this country. They don't want to do about it in most countries. I've had many dealings with Antifa, and I was very happy to see you focusing on the work of Andy No earlier today, because he is the expert on this in the world. He's the author of this fantastic book, which I just want to plug for him because he's a friend of mine, Unmasked. that's the authority on this. But yeah, the authorities involved want to pretend that this is just an idea and not an actual group of terrorists all around the world.
Yeah, we're so grateful for Andy. And truly, as you highlighted in your tweet, this is something that the mainstream media is just refusing to cover. He's the only person that's been regularly reporting on this for years. But as people like you and I know, this history of violent behavior is a long history. It's not a new idea that just surfaced with Charlie Kirk. And it certainly isn't a little isolated incidents here and there across the Western world. This is a very clear pattern of behavior and a network of well-funded, well-trained, very similar individuals across the globe. So give us a little bit of a scope for what that looks like in Canada. I know I'm sure this is not the only time that you've been exposed to them. It might be the only time you've been physically assaulted by them. But are they everywhere that you're seeing across these major cities?
I've had about 4 dozen different assaults, not always by them, but many times. It's similar everywhere you go. These people hate the West. They hate everything that is good and beautiful. They hate Christianity. They call Christians Christo-fascists. And I actually get more violence in Canada, I think, because it's not really punished here at all. In that case, with the broken arm, it seemed the police were more interested in investigating me. They questioned me, and they questioned this man who had come out with me, just someone that I'd met through Twitter, actually. He was out there to support me. But I have a letter from the Montreal police stating that unless I could give them the names of my masked and hooded attackers, that there's nothing they can do. And there are cameras everywhere, by the way, in Montreal. They're on every street. I was on St. Catherine Street, the busiest street in Montreal. It was 7 p.m. on a Friday night during COVID, March 12th, 2021. And it was actually way busier than that video shows because everyone scrambled as soon as that attack happened. There were actually 6 or 7 people. A few had already fled in a car by that point. And they'd stomped on my body cam in the middle of the street. So I pulled up my phone to film because I'm not going to run from these guys. But police could have easily just looked at the footage, looked at the license plate, watched the CCTV cameras to see where they walked, but they didn't do any of it. And they actually told me 2 months later that they lost the footage.
Earlier in the show, we uncovered a tweet from our friends at Libs of TikTok about how there are now police officers, at least one in North Carolina, saying that they are affiliated with Antifa and have publicly on social media declared their support for Republicans in America to be executed for their right-wing beliefs via guillotine, which is incredibly dark and disturbing. Do you think there may be some incidents of that happening in Canada too?
Yeah, this is the same everywhere. And I've done a lot of work in the US. I've had people show up with Antifa in Portland and Seattle and down south in California and Rhode Island and Boston. And it's always the same story. These are just radical far left extremists who increasingly are involved in this whole cult of gender, transgenderism, whatever you want to call it. And even in Brussels recently, I was thrown in jail with a friend of mine who is the international spokesperson for ADF International, the Alliance Defending Freedom. They're a legal organization, a Christian organization representing people all over the world when their rights are being violated. And we called the police there because we were getting surrounded by a mob, and increasingly more people all wearing black were showing up. So I think word had gotten out to their local Antifa people. And so we called the police. And they decided we were the problem, ordered us to take off our signs and leave. I refused to do that because I know my rights. And we were arrested. We were then told we were being charged criminally. We were then handcuffed, taken to another police station, strip searched, thrown in jail for a few hours, released with no charge, no ticket. They sent my signs for destruction. But the punishment is the process in many of these cases if they don't have anything to go after you legally. And I think the US is doing a much better job than the rest of these countries all throughout Western Europe, mainland Europe, Canada, Australia. It's the same story. They don't want to prosecute these individuals. Most of these governments are run by leftists. But at least now in the United States, President Trump has declared them a domestic terror organization. And I'm informed by Mr. Andy Ngo that the Department of National Intelligence is looking at declaring the international organizations foreign terrorist organizations. And that has a lot more teeth to it because then they can go start sanctioning them. They can criminalize anyone who works with them or receives funds from them. So I'm confident President Trump is all over this, and they're going to help the rest of the world with the actions they're taking.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I want to come back to that in a second. But Chris, just for those who might not follow your work very well, you said you're wearing signs. We know what those are. But for those just now learning about your story, what are your signs saying? What's really your crime here when you're thrown into prison or being physically assaulted by these radical terrorists?
Yeah, so I'm apparently a far-right extremist because I think children are beautiful just as they are, and they don't need drugs or scalpels to be happy. So I quit my job as a financial advisor 5 years ago, and I started going outside, talking to people on the streets and at university campuses across Canada. And I just speak with people about what I consider the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, the business of giving kids puberty-blocking drugs, the opposite sex's hormones, and surgeries. They are, in the United States, they are doing double mastectomies on girls as young as 12 years old, because these girls who usually are on the autism spectrum or have suffered sexual abuse or have other mental health comorbidities, these kids have been taught this really terrible lie that they were born in the wrong body and they're supposed to be something they're not, and they're sterilizing children. And I'm a dad of 2 girls. They're 13 and 15 years old now, but I just learned about this back in 2019, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I'd been watching the downward spiral of Western civilization for quite a while, and this was just a step too far for me. So I did what every normal person does. I quit my job, and I became a human billboard standing out on the street getting punched in the face by Antifa. But I have to tell you, Isabel, it's way more satisfying than a regular job, just chasing money. And I'll be at this for the rest of my life because this ideology isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
You know, you say that as a joke, just what a normal person would do. I think that is what an actually sane normal person would do, is just do something. Do what you can in your own sphere of influence. And God has clearly used your story to impact so many millions of people around the world, probably beyond what you ever expected this to do. But all it took was the courage to make a sandwich board that said children can't consent to puberty blockers and to stand outside and have conversations with people. That's really the Charlie Kirk effect. It's what we've been doing in the right for a long, long time here in America and across the Western world, but I hope that normal people will continue to embrace that courage too. So I know you joke about that, but it is true. On this international front, with this idea of declaring Antifa as an international terrorist organization, you've been jailed in Brussels, you've been beat up in Canada, you've been beat up in the United States. Are you thinking that there is this undertow of international financing, organization, structure to Antifa that nobody is really paying attention to?
There are about 80 different organizations just in the US who work to bail out these criminals. And back in the George Floyd riots, we had Kamala Harris even advocating for people to donate to one of these funds where these violent criminals can instantly get out of prison. There are international organizations. There are people raising money on Patreon. There are people raising money on Give, Send, Go for these criminals, because GoFundMe doesn't allow people to raise money if they've been accused of a violent crime, but Give, Send, Go does. And I understand why Give, Send, Go lets all of these fundraisers just go on. But as a Christian organization, I think sometimes they should be drawing the line. And yeah, there's a ton of international money in this. Now, it's a bit tricky because there is some truth to this thing that Antifa is not only an organization, it's a physical thing. There are people who join these clubs, these cells, but they can also just rebrand themselves as something else and just say that they're against fascism. So it can be a little bit tricky, but there are absolutely international organizations. There are bank accounts. There are people who advertise these things that with just a little bit of diligence, they can certainly go after. And I just want to correct one thing. I don't say that I was beat up by these people. I say I just let them assault me because unfortunately, that's what I have to do in Canada. I was once arrested after giving a man a single push after he sucker punched me from behind, and police wanted to charge me with assault causing bodily harm. And so I vowed then and there, I'm never fighting back against these guys, especially in Canada, unless my life is physically in danger, because the authorities are just looking for a reason to put me away while they let all these violent criminals roam free. And it's much more effective in activism to be peaceful, to expose the other side. And I guess someone told me the other day, one of my superpowers is my ability to just take these things, and I don't really consider it a superpower. I consider it just civil behavior. And most of these men who do attack me aren't the type that you really need to worry about anyway, because they're never the big, strong guys. Every time I see a big, strong guy walking down the street, I know they're going to support me. But peaceful activism in the face of violence is the way that we have to approach this. And I know that's not for everybody, but for the men especially. And I have a message really for the young men on these university campuses. I do this for your generation. I actually just bought your book, Isabel. The end of the alphabet. Sorry, it's in the mail. But I do this for my daughter's generation. They're Gen Z.
Yeah.
I'm not sending my girls into a world that doesn't know what a woman is, and a world that's trying to change the sex of children. And the young men, really, and I know Charlie was really focused on reaching them as well, they have been cowed into silence in some cases. They've been told that they are the most oppressive people in the world by virtue of being a white heterosexual male or whatever. And I think those days are over, and they just need to find their voice and speak up, because the world is theirs for the taking. The world is yours for the taking. You're doing an amazing job. And we just have to stop being silent, because it's only through silence that these violent people and these terrible ideologies prosper.
That's absolutely correct. I could not have said that any better myself. Chris, if you had a message also, not just for the people doing ground activism like you and I do every day, but for people that can legally make a difference in this fight and can take appropriate governance action all around the world, not just the United States or Canada, what would you ask them to do today?
Just do something. We live in such a culture of fear where people say, oh, I can't speak up because I'm a doctor and I could get in trouble with my regulatory body. That's not true. There are all sorts of doctors, pediatricians, psychiatrists speaking up against this. They still have their jobs. Sometimes you just need to be a little smart about it, but you can absolutely voice your disagreement on these things. If you're a lawyer, you can take pro bono cases helping these people who don't have the finances to do it. I could spend all my time in litigation, to be honest with you, with all the things that happen, but there's never been an opportunity to do that because I'm just an activist standing out on the street. It doesn't exactly pay very well, but there are people who can do things. I fortunately now have made friends with organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom, where they help fund my case against the Australian government. And I won a huge freedom of speech case earlier this year against their e-safety commissioner. But I just think that this culture of we can't do anything needs to stop, because when you look for reasons why you can't do something, you will find reasons why you can't. But when you look for reasons how you can, you will find those ways as well. So just look for what you can do, even if it's just speaking with your school principal or going to a school board meeting or whatever. We can all do something. And that's really my main goal in life. I'm out here to educate millions of people, but I'm out here to activate people as well. Because when we activate others to do this fight, our efforts compound, just like money compounds. And pretty soon we start restoring order in society.
Oh, beautifully said. And we're going to have you back on the show to talk about 25 different things, all of the fight that you have for free speech across the world, the activism conversations you're having with people. And just want to say thank you for this continued fight against Antifa. This has been a long time coming for a terrorist designation, and I'm very hopeful it happens internationally as well. But you and I are no strangers to this type of thing, and your bravery and your courage is just so inspiring to behold. So thank you for everything that you do, Chris.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do. You're a shining star for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have you back soon. I love Chris. He's literally one of my favorite follows on social media. I've been following his story for a long time, and he's absolutely right. All it takes is the courage to stand outside with a sign and to say something that is objectively true, that children can't consent to puberty blockers or any of the other stories that he talks about. It genuinely breaks my heart, though, that we live in a society where he says, I have to let them assault me, or I'm the one who's going to end up in prison. You guys know how much I absolutely love Hallow, how I listen to it every day, and it's totally transformed mine and my family's prayer life. This month, one of Hallow's most beloved prayer challenges, and one of my personal favorites, has returned, the Saints in 7 Days series. The point is incredibly simple. For just a week, we talk about the saints, not just as distant figures on stained glass windows, but they were real men and women whose lives and all of their struggles and triumphs reveal the grace and glory glory of God. And in discovering their stories and their relationships with God, we may just begin to see how God is quietly at work in our own lives too. Starting last week on September 15th, Hallow started with the story of King David, bringing that story to life with Michael Iskander from House of David. David's story is one of my favorites in the Bible. It's one of the most dramatic in Scripture. He was a shepherd turned warrior, turned king, turned poet. He was flawed, of course, like we all are, but he always returned back to the Lord. His psalms still echo with raw honesty, repentance, and trust. And it was an amazing week that you can go back and listen to. This week, just yesterday, Gwen Stefani started the week by telling us the story of Esther, the young queen who risked absolutely everything, stood before power, and became God's instrument of salvation for her people. In the next couple of weeks this month, they're walking through the stories of Saint Therese of Lisieux, one of my favorite saints, who shows us the holiness of the little way, our choices of everyday love and trust in pursuing holiness, and Saint Oscar Romero, who teaches us what it means to stand for truth and justice, even to the point of martyrdom. Together, these witnesses remind us that holiness is not one size fits all. We're all called in different ways, and God writes his story in every life, including yours. You can join us anytime for Saints in 7 Days. You don't have to listen as it's coming out every day. Go back and listen to the old ones because they're so good. And you can get 3 months free at Hallow at the link provided to you right here, hallow.com/Isabel. So I think that begs the question, what happens next? What comes next with Antifa violence? Because we've arrived at this time where you have to let yourself be the victim of violent crime, or you are the one who is going to be victimized by legal weaponization. I mean, that's the only word I can even think of, is the weaponization of our legal system that makes you the bad guy, not the masked, concealed, well-funded, well-organized, violent terrorists that are the ones physically assaulting you. And this has now escalated to the point of assassination, as we know from the situation in the last few weeks with Charlie Kirk, that they'll insist has nothing to do with Antifa. But we all know so much better than that. In the wake of Charlie's death just a few days later, after Jimmy Kimmel lost his show temporarily, that I guess is now back on the air tonight, way too many moving parts there, and I can't even begin to wrap my head around that. Someone took to the ABC affiliate office in their hometown to shoot at the building. This happened in California, and now is one of the reasons that ABC says they're putting Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. Andy Ngo ended up breaking this morning. Turns out the Democrat who was accused of shooting the ABC station in Sacramento, who, by the way, conveniently has been released from prison, just where we're at. Thank you, California. Also had a note that specifically referenced Charlie Kirk's assassination, and that note warned that many people in the Trump administration were next, specifically Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, and Kash Patel. The man's social media appears to have shown radicalization specifically from the liberal media. Unbelievable. You literally can't make this up. So Charlie is killed mere days later, after Jimmy Kimmel is taken off the air, and everyone convinced you that you should be more outraged about a late night comedian with the worst TV ratings I've ever seen being taken off the air for being a bad TV host. That should outrage you more about free speech in this country than a man who was assassinated speaking freely on a college campus. They put him back on the air because of fear of terrorism, after their affiliate office was shot by a radical, violent individual who was radicalized by left-wing ideology, who then now says, yeah, just like Charlie Kirk was assassinated, you in the Trump administration are next. And I'm out of prison because I live in California, and there are apparently no rules, and no justice in a state like California. I predict this cover-up of Antifa is only going to continue, and it's not going to stay localized to the mainstream media and the media outrage that we're seeing over all of this, saying Antifa doesn't really exist. This is seeping into governance. And as we alluded to earlier in the show, members of Congress have started floating this Antifa doesn't exist, or even more radically, I am Antifa concept. But there's actually legislation starting to be introduced at the state level in America saying basically we have to pretend it doesn't exist from a legal perspective. State legislators have begun floating the idea of making it illegal for you to even acknowledge that people have died from violent crimes. I'm straight up not making this up. This is a screenshot from a proposed amendment that, by the grace of God, failed in North Carolina in the last few days, where someone asked specifically for this amendment on a bill related to violent crime introduced by Senator Mohammed of Mecklenburg County. Not going to comment on that. That was in the wake of Irina Zarutska's murder here in North Carolina, to ban the use of Irina Zarutska's name or image in any political context. It is a blatant attempt, this tweeter said, by Democrats to cover up the real consequences of their failed policies. For the greater context here, and I want to leave this up on the screen so you guys can keep reading it because I know it's a lot going on. But for the greater context of all of this all started as a proposed amendment to North Carolina House Bill 307. This legislation was introduced by Republicans to bring back the death penalty to the state of North Carolina and to make it harder for people with criminal histories and mental illness to get back on the street after being arrested. That's important because, as we know, the young man who killed Irina Zarutska had been imprisoned 14 separate times and let out of prison 14 separate times before he violently stabbed her to death, which we talked about on the show the day before. Or the day of. I can't even remember. All of the days are running together in my head. I believe that was our show the day that Charlie was killed. And obviously we've ended up focusing on that the last few days. But we have not forgotten about the story of Irina Zarutska. So this was a Republican bill that was introduced to bring back the death penalty and make it harder for people with a criminal history to get let out of prison multiple times in a row. A Democrat attaches this proposed amendment to the legislation that specifically says it should be prohibited to use a deceased crime victim's name, image, or likeness in any political advertising. So Republican candidates running for Democrat seats couldn't use a picture of Irina Zarutska and the situation that we saw on the train in North Carolina in saying we need to get tougher on crime. Or a more extreme example, had this amendment passed, no one in North Carolina could use Charlie Kirk's photo. And it goes further, by the way. It defines a deceased crime victim as an individual whose proximate cause of death was an alleged crime, not even a confirmed one, and includes their immediate family members, a spouse, child, sibling, parent, grandparent, or grandchild of the deceased crime victim. You could not use step-parents, step-children, step-siblings, adoptive relationships, anyone remotely in the family unit of a person who died from an alleged crime. No name, image, or likeness in any political advertising. So basically, pretend it never frickin' happened. Luckily, the amendment failed. The original bill about bringing back the death penalty and making it harder for people to be let out of prison successive times over and over again did pass by the grace of God, even though this amendment failed. And not a single Democrat, not one Democrat in the state legislature for North Carolina voted for the bill. Because honestly, they love violent criminals. They love organizations like Antifa. They love violent radicalization of people on the left wing of the political aisle more than they love the people that they are supposed to serve and protect. That they have been elected to try to make their communities a better, safer, more prosperous, and more flourishing place. And most of them, by the way, the Democrats actually got up and walked out while they were voting on this bill because they didn't get their way of banning any conversation about violent crime happening related to any political advertising. No one in media is talking about that today, but make no mistake about it, that is the next step. That is the next step in this cover-up of Antifa. And I don't doubt for a second that very similar legislation will be introduced at the national level as well. They want you to be criminally punished for using an image of someone like Charlie Kirk or Irina Zarutska to point out that we have a left-wing violence problem in the United States of America. Right is wrong, and wrong is right. This feels like something out of George Orwell's Animal Farm, genuinely, where they change the writing on the side of the barn every 5 minutes and everyone says, hey, hang on a second, that's not what it said a minute ago. And the animals in charge said, that's what it's always said. That's what it's always said. We've never had a violence problem in America. Antifa isn't even a thing. What is that word? What does that word even mean? Antifa has never beat up a conservative. Antifa has never broken someone's bones. Antifa has never radicalized someone to the point of shooting someone in the neck for speaking freely on a college campus about their faith and the importance of free speech. What are you talking about? You're the crazy one. Make no mistake about it. That is the next step. And we have to say no. We have to wake up, pull the wool over from our eyes, pull the curtain back, and realize the tactics that the left wing entirely is attempting to employ here in gaslighting you into submission of accepting this insane terrorist violence as normal, because it is not normal. Well, I guess theoretically you could argue it has become normal. Normal by the sake of standards that everybody has experienced this, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be acceptable, let alone the fact that it is normal. And the only way that we can stop this narrative from going completely off the tracks is if we have the courage to act now. You don't have to act after President Donald Trump declares Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. You don't have to wait to say enough is enough for hopefully the next step, as Chris is asking for, and we are as well, of Antifa being declared as an international terrorist organization. You don't have to wait to stand up and say this is never okay in our society once every member of Antifa is rounded up and put in prison for violent crimes. You don't have to do that. You can simply have the courage to speak the truth now, to highlight the wrongful death of someone like Charlie Kirk now, to draw the line in the sand on your social media pages, in the conversations you're having with your friends, in the conversations around the Thanksgiving dinner table in a few weeks, with your extended family, in the media that you consume, in your educational settings, everything, to say we have gone too far. This thing that is very, very real, that is recognizable, that is a pattern of behavior we've seen for the last decade plus, this thing Antifa is observable, it has been cataloged, it has been traced, and enough is enough. It's not a loose idea. It's not a set of responsive emotions to right-wing politics. It's not a figment of our imagination. It is radical, tangible, documented left-wing violence that has got to stop if we are serious about living in a functioning society, let alone a flourishing one. So have the courage. Post about this. Tweet about it. Talk about it. Pressure your elected officials about it. Stop watching media that pretends it doesn't exist. Because we, the people, have the ability, have the capacity uniquely in America to put the people in charge back in their rightful place, which is working for us, not the other way around. Do not forget that. And I want to leave you with this. In the wake of what has happened in the past few weeks, it is totally understandable to be afraid. It's totally understandable to be afraid of this left-wing violence, especially when our elected officials and the media are running overtime and going out of their way to pretend like you shouldn't even realize it's happening to begin with, to cover it up, to sweep it under the rug, and to empower it to continue happening in the shadows without any sort of retribution or punishment consequences for this behavior in the first place. I shared with you guys when I went to Colorado State University the other day from a very vulnerable place. I was scared. I was terrified of speaking on a college campus outside in an open air football stadium. It was terrifying. I know for a fact that all of my friends who do this for a living, all of us in the content creator world, we're all apprehensive about speaking on college campuses. We're apprehensive about doing engagements, speaking engagements, especially outside. And I think for a while, most of our events probably won't be outside. I know many people who are literally having conversations about wearing bulletproof vests to give speeches about abortion on college campuses because they're genuinely considering the fact that they might be shot by Antifa, by the way, not just anybody, on these college campuses for speaking the truth. So it is understandable to be afraid. But the only way that we can conquer fear, the only way that we can move our society beyond a place of being afraid of these people is if we have the courage to keep getting up anyway, because this is the tactic of the left. It has been from the time I started working in the conservative movement as a college student, saying the truth and speaking the truth in my college classroom and running for student government when they would call you a racist and a Nazi and Hitler Youth Barbie and all of the things. Their idea was to get you to be afraid, to stop talking, to be afraid of the name calling. And when that didn't work and we kept speaking, then they started showing up with big crowds of people outside. And when that didn't work and we kept speaking, then they started showing their force. They started throwing punches and knocking down windows and throwing rocks through the door. And when that didn't work and we kept speaking, they took a young man's life. The question is, are we going to allow their fear tactics to continue working? Or are we going to keep getting up in the face of evil, in the face of fear, in the face of potential harm, and telling the truth anyway? J.D. Vance said in his speech eulogizing Charlie, which was so beautiful, it is far better to die a young man in this life than to sell your soul for evil at the expense of truth. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it was so powerful. And that sat with me. 99.99999% of us are not going to lose our life in this fight. Thanks be to God for that, by the way. But even if we put ourselves in harm's way, I want you to remember that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage and continuing to stand up and speak the truth is standing up anyway, even when you are terrified, even when we're shaking in fear, even when we know what the consequences for this at the extreme level might look like. Because it's only when we take away the left's only tactic, which is scaring you into submission, that we can actually change hearts and minds. And look what's happened in actually changing hearts and minds in the last 2 weeks because we had the courage to keep going. So don't lose heart. Don't cower to fear. Keep speaking the truth, even when you're terrified, because it's exactly what Charlie would have done, and it's what we all owe to each other in the face of left-wing extremism.